Ellis Act doesn't have anything to do with most of us because most of us in South LA, we don't Ellis out buildings. And what Ellis Act did, which was another realtor bill back in 95, it just said that a municipality could not force a owner to stay in the rental business, especially if it became economically unfeasible for a person to stay in business. But what the Ellis Act did, it set up parameters for if you wanted to go out of the rental housing business. And through the years, there has been a lot of change in legislation with Ellis Act. And one of the things that there are several key points, and we've argued Ellis back ever since it is. First, when Ellis Act first came out, it said that a normal tenant would have to be given a 90-day notice if you were going to Ellis a building out and go out of business. Then they put a provision in that said that if a person was a senior or disabled, they get a year. Then as we argued year and year after year, so finally the bill got to the point where everybody just lived with that you have to give everybody a year. Where the problem came in is last year when they attacked Ellis Act again, they put in a provision that said that that it would have to coordinate with a person's school year. You couldn't Ellis Act a person if you had a child in school that would put them out of the school district and stuff like that. And we argued, virtually that's a life estate. What if a person has 4 or 5 kids and they're all in different schools, different grades? I mean, you end up giving them a 10-year notice to vacate. So we were finally able to, get through that point, which, you would think it would take a rocket scientist to figure that out. But so we argued a lot about that.
So you got to go out to a year?
Yeah, so it's a year for everybody. And that just set the count. But now the thing about Ellis, two things let me add to it. In the original Ellis Act, which it said that if you went out of business, and if you came back in the business within less than 2 years, then you would have to offer that unit to the previous tenant at the same rental rate if you went back in 2 years. After 5 years, you were under no obligation to do that. In the current bill that we were able to defeat, the author withdrew that. They wanted to extend that to 10 years. And so we said very simple, and a lot of times people do look at common sense. Typically, when a person's Ellising out of building, it's typically places like Santa Monica down there where they're taking a big building and they're gonna reposition that building. They're gonna gut it and do all sort of things. And normally when you're doing a big project like that, by the time, because of these permits and cities and stuff, by the time you redo a big building like that, you're going to be into 3 years, 3.5 years with permits and doing all that stuff. So most developers didn't have a problem with the 5 year because they figured, we finished the building, 5 or 6 months ahead of time. No big deal. We already spent $10 million. So, what's another couple $1,000? So, but what we argued with them, if you stretch that to 10 years, that developer is not going to bring that back as a residential income producing property. That property will come back as a commercial building because no one's going to wait 10 years off that market. So the author did remove the 10-year, and so we're back at the 5. And we did work some with the unlimited caps on civil liability. If you came back within that 2 years, we put a cap in terms of what kind of fees and stuff you could be charged.